It's 4 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the City of Kerrville, Texas Economic Improvement Corporation. If I could ask Danny Allman to lead us in the invocation.
Okay, may we pray? Dear Lord, thank you for this wonderful community we enjoy on a daily basis. Please guide us in our deliberations today and in the future. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. All right, item number 1 is the Visitors and Citizens Forum. Any citizen with business not scheduled on the agenda may speak to the EIC. No deliberation or action can be taken on these items because the Open Meetings Act requires the item to be posted on the agenda 72 hours before the meeting. Visitors are asked to limit your presentation to 3 minutes. Do I have any visitors that are wishing to speak? I see none, so we can move on to item 2, which is approval of the minutes of the meeting held September 16th, 2019. Those minutes should be in your package in front of you. And I'm looking for a motion to approve.
I'll move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any changes or discussion with regard to those minutes? I hear none. All those in favor of approving the minutes, signal by raising your right hand. And that is approved unanimously. All right, item number 3, which are monthly reports, our financial reports for September of 2019. Ms. Dozier?
All right, good afternoon. I'm going to start today with going through a few brief slides on the refunding opportunity that I spoke to you a little bit about last month and that Council has now approved. And this is on debts that EIC is paying the debt service on, so I want to make sure y'all are aware of it. So this is a presentation that our financial advisors gave to City Council last week, and I'm going to just hit some highlights from it. These first couple of graphs are just showing that interest rates are at a historic low right now, so that's a good time to be looking at a refunding, which is a refinancing, but that's the bond term for it. I'm going to get to this slide, slide number 6. So the with bonds, you know, they have to, there's parameters that have to be put in the initial bond that says when it can be refunded or refinanced. It can't just be at any time. So this 2011A issuance is the one that's eligible for refunding, and that is a debt issuance that was used to pay for a portion of River Trail. And as you can see on this slide, we have $2.4 million left to pay back on that one. So that's what would be refunded. And so the way it would work is, you know, it's very similar to like a mortgage refinancing. This bond would be paid off and then a new one would be issued, but it would have better terms that would result in some savings on the debt service. It would be a new issuance called Series 2019. And the analysis that our financial advisors did looked at interest rates where they stood last week. And so, you know, if we moved forward with it last week, and it's similar to mortgages where, you know, it changes on a day-to-day basis, you know, where you lock in kind of thing. If we would have moved forward with this last week, we could save potentially $111,000. And let's see, let me get to this slide here. $111,000 in debt service over the remaining life of the debt. A couple of key things to note is it was originally a 20-year issuance issued in 2011 to be repaid by 2031, and that term doesn't change. So we're not extending the maturity of this, we're just getting a better interest rate. And a few things to note too, as far as the savings go, we can structure it in a few different ways. Our financial advisor is recommending that if we do this refunding, we take the savings more upfront. So you'll see that in 2021 and 2022, that's where the majority of the savings would be on slide 8 here. So, you know, $45,000, $41,000, so that would reduce EIC's expenses in those years for debt service. They also did an analysis that shows what if interest rates went up 25 basis points, so 0.25%, what would happen then? And you can see that the gross savings over on the right-hand side would still be $74,000 over the remaining life of the debt. So, it's not a huge number over a 10-year period, but certainly 74,000 is 74,000 that we'd like to take advantage of. And these savings are after the cost of the refunding is taken out. So, we have to pay some costs to actually do this to our financial advisor and bond counsel, that kind of thing. So these savings are looking at it on a net basis. All right, so what council authorized last week was something called a parameters bond sale. And basically, this means that council is authorizing either the city manager, the mayor, or me to move forward with this refunding if certain parameters are met. So we don't know exactly what the savings are going to be, and this is a ordinance that's good for 6 months. So basically, once we get all of our paperwork in, the Attorney General has to review it, that kind of thing, we can look at the market conditions, and at any time during a 6-month period, we can say, okay, the rates are good today, we want to move on it today, and then we take the savings as of that day. So that's what council approved. These are on slide 12 here. This shows the minimum parameters. So basically that's showing, okay, if we have to have a minimum amount of savings for this to be worth it. And if the market suddenly changes and interest rates go back up and we can't meet these minimum thresholds, then we just wouldn't move forward with it. And we would just keep the same debt issuance that we have. So, looking at the timetable, we're in the process of getting all of our paperwork together. We have to get a rating from S&P. We have to give documents to the Attorney General's office, that kind of thing. So we're on track to do all of that in November, and we could possibly get pricing as early as the beginning of December. So if market rates are good, then at the beginning of December, we'd have some pricing, and I would have an update for y'all in your December meeting. If the rates aren't that favorable then, or if we're expecting them to go down, anytime in the future, we may wait. So we'll have all the paperwork in, and then we'll wait until we think that the market is right, and then move forward with it at that time. And one other thing to note here is that there's another issuance, the 2012 issuance, that was also used for River Trail that will be eligible for refunding in the spring. So we may be coming back to you again with another opportunity if interest rates remain low. Any questions on the refunding?
So this is informational only, as it's already been approved by council? It's
already been approved by the council, and as you know, the EIC doesn't issue debt, so it was the city that issued this debt. But EIC does the debt, pays for the debt service on it. So I wanted to make sure y'all knew. So it should just be a good news story. It just means that EIC has the potential to pay less in debt service if we are able to move forward and interest rates remain low.
So if we do move forward, is it a formality that we approve that debt service payment again, since the issuance number is changing? Is that necessary, or does it stay with it for its life, just because of the use of the funds?
You approve a budget each year that has the debt service in it. So we'll see how the numbers turn out. Right now it looks like that the 2020 debt service would not change too much, maybe $2,000 or something, like $2,000 less than what EIC already appropriated. And then for the 2021 budget year, that's where we'd see larger savings, and you would see that in your budget process when we're doing that next summer for the 2021 budget. But yeah, that's an annual deal, so I don't think we need to reapprove for the life of the loan since you approve it on an
So
annual
is it a
basis.
condition of the bond that EIC is funding the debt service?
I think there's a separate agreement between the city and EIC for this debt service.
I would think for
I don't know
sure.
if there's anything captured in the actual bond.
Yeah, I don't think that there is, because the city issued the bond.
Okay.
And actually, it's even guaranteed by property taxes, kind of as a co-signer on the bond kind of thing to get a lower rate. So we don't ever intend property taxes to be used to pay for this debt, but it is guaranteed with property taxes. So.
Very good.
All right. Any other questions on bond refundings? Moving on to our statement of activities. So, as you know, our fiscal year ended on September 30th. We're in the process of closing our books for the year, and we'll have our audit starting up in a couple of weeks in November. So I want to focus on the year-to-date column, the third one over, year-to-date actual, and look at a few things there. So year-to-date, sales tax came in at $3.6 million. So very healthy, up 5.3% for the year compared to 2018, and better than what we had budgeted. And it was good to see that we saw strong increases in food services, construction, information, retail, some of our large categories we saw real strong performance from. And on the expense side, just for the month of September, I wanted to note that in addition to just the debt service and administrative expense, EIC made the first payment on the Olympic Drive project, payment for $156,000 that's equal to the engineering contract on Olympic Drive that is already underway. So following this activity, you'll see down at the bottom, you'll see the change in net position of a minus $153,000. So EIC is drawing down their fund balance a little bit this year. But if you'll move to the second page, the cash flow forecast, you'll see that the ending cash balance at the end of September is $3.9 million. So definitely a healthy cash balance there. And then this should be starting to look familiar to you now. You'll see your projected cash flow out through 2020. The project expenses that I have listed are just the ones that there's actually signed contracts for. So I know you're contemplating some things today, and what you see here just represents the signed agreements. So a low of $1.4 million in the second quarter of 2020. So a positive, healthy cash balance throughout 2020. Right now, we do have the cash invested in text pool, which we talk about every month. Those rates, unfortunately, are falling a little bit, but helping us get a better bond rate. But anyway, we're still over 2% on the interest that we're earning in that text pool account, and it is completely liquid, so it can be used for project spending at any time. Any questions on the statement of activities or the cash flow forecast? All right.
Question?
Nope.
Okay.
All right.
And then the last thing that I attached, I do this on a quarterly basis, are reports from Fox Tank and James Avery that just show, Fox Tank actually gives us a report every single month. James Avery reports quarterly, so I just decided to give y'all the quarterly update on both of them. But basically these reports just show that both entities are meeting the goals in their agreement. James Avery has a contractual agreement saying that they need to have at least 191 employees. They currently have 279 additional employees compared to where they were when they started this expansion project. So they are 88 employees more than what their agreement specifies, so that's good. At the end of this year, they'll go up to having a requirement of 252 employees in the agreement, but they're already ahead of that number as well, so performing very well there. Fox Tank also has substantially more employees than what the agreement calls for. So their agreement looks at actual number of employees. They also have parameters around what percentage must live in Kerr County. So they have 103 actual employees. The agreement specifies they have to have at least 30 employees, so they're ahead there. The agreement specifies that 60% must live in Kerr County, and they're showing 71% residing in Kerr County, so they're ahead there as well. And that's all I have. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 3B, which is our projects update. Mr. Hobby?
All right. Good afternoon. I'm going to go through these 10 projects that EIC has catalyzed here over the last couple of years. Starting off with the River Trail Extension, you may have seen some mobilization going on around the area of Water Street, Main Street, Broadway, that whole area. We've got crews out there now. We had a project kickoff meeting between the last time that we met with you all and today. So we're excited to have that one moving forward, and hopefully we'll have folks able to utilize that River Trail Extension over to Schreiner University starting this summer. Everything goes on track. So that's the game plan. Arrow Pipe Bridge, again, we were successful in being awarded a $1 million state disaster recovery funds. We're in the process now. Amy and I just kicked off the secondary process for an additional $500,000 that we're going to be going after on that project. We have moved forward with the engineering contract for that infrastructure to be located up on the 534 bridge. So moving forward on that. Tender Center improvements, things are tracking along there. Hopeful to have that reopened by the spring timeframe if we can have continued good weather over the winter. Aquatics feasibility study, we are wrapping that up. We're looking at operational costs and really kind of paring that project down into what might be a feasible project going forward. Olympic Drive extension, construction documents are being, or they're actually out on the street. We're hoping to have bids back by the end of this week. So hopeful on that, keep our fingers crossed. We've got good sharp pencils on that, and we can move forward with that project. Groundbreaking for the middle school today, so hopefully everything will sync up and we can have a road built and a school going up, and also catalyze additional business activity throughout that corridor. Downtown streetscape, continuing to work on those construction documents. Hopefully have that out on the street here the next 4 to 6 weeks, so we can get it out to bid, see what bids come back, and hopefully have a construction project starting up at the beginning of 2020. Legion Lift Station is on track. We've reached surface level at this point. A lot of good work going into that one. Really close to wrapping that project up. Hoping for testing and full functionality in first quarter of 2020. On to 3 private projects. Econo Lodge, Hobby Lobby. You heard last time projected opening date in quarter 4 of 2019. They have roughed that project in for the most part on the interior work, and so really working through some of the site work. I saw them pouring sidewalks this morning, so once they can get that all paved up, then I'm sure the interior work will be pretty fast order. We're excited to see those registers start rolling here soon. The Thompson Spur 98 infrastructure extension, the offsite water extension has been completed, so they are clear to begin their site work, potentially going vertical on that here in the near term. Wastewater extension is continuing. That's a little bit further progress because they got to get up and down a couple of additional hills going there towards the east. So, but a lot of good progress on that front. Arcadia renovation, it's our understanding that construction documents are being developed. I know we've seen some building permit submittals here recently. We're anticipating construction again in construction document completion and beginning of construction late this quarter, early first quarter. So again, with the final construction anticipated or a significant opening anticipated in that July timeframe this summer. Be happy to answer your questions you may have.
Questions?
A lot of good projects.
Boy, busy.
No doubt.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Monthly reports, item 3C, Kerr Economic Development Corporation. Mr. Salinas?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members of the board, at the last meeting we had reported that we'd be hosting a prospect after having visited their headquarters. And we did. October 7th and 9th, the company came and visited. There was 4 executives that came in. 2 were, one was the director of operations, the other one was the chief financial officer, and then there were 2 financial stakeholders from the actual company. I'm glad to report that since their visit to Kerrville, the project has gained much momentum, so it's starting to really now progress. The name of the project is SkyMaster. That is a company in the aerospace sector. They are a manufacturer of aviation components. They're a tier 1 supplier to OEMs and MROs, which for a community this size, whenever we're able to say that we're working, even a tier 2 company, that's kind of a big deal. companies looking at a facility in Kerrville, but in addition to that, they're also looking as to whether they're going to be expanding up in the Midwest where they're at. So there is competition for the project. Ideally, they need about 20,000 square feet of space for a 40 to 60 person operation. We've got about 10,000 square feet of space or a footprint that would kind of like help them get their foot in the door and then grow from there. We're looking at about the $5 million in capital investment and about $17 to $20 an hour as far as what they would be, the wages that would be paying for this particular project and full benefits. So after having toured their facility, kind of kicked the tires, this is a project that definitely fits Kerrville to a T. Coming back to the actual visit, this was kind of like, at least in my eyes, my first big test, right? This is the first project that we've started, and knock on wood, it might be from start to finish. And I kind of equate this to, you know, when guests are coming over to your house, right? You know, I've got kids, so I've got 3 boys, right? So it's like, you know, you clean up the house and you tell your kids like, hey, you know, we need you on your best behavior. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but that's kind of how I felt, right? It's like, okay, we've got a prospect coming in. How's Kerrville gonna respond to this? So I'm happy to report that Team Kerrville, which is in addition to you all, some of the agency heads that we have here, did a phenomenal job. I was pretty proud of the fact that the prospect came in, and there was a lot of work that went into it as far as the actual agenda, what have you. When they came in, they first, we took them out to the airport, had a quick tour of the airport, some of the facilities and greenfield sites that we have out there. So one of the first people that they got to meet, and in addition to myself, was Mary Rohr. And obviously she knows a thing or two about real estate, so she did a great job in that regard. And then shortly thereafter, we had a evening meeting with one of our stakeholders. And again, just kind of like, you know, rehashing everything that we've done. What does Kerrville have to offer? Next morning, we briefed at the EDC office, and then Mike Whitler, who's, in addition to being the chair of my organization, he's also with KPUB. Hill Country Telephone was also there in attendance, and he did a great job, not just with the prospect, but also following through, and that's key with all these different projects. Having a municipally owned utility, and where I came from, I had access to one as well. That's a huge, huge advantage when it comes to working prospects and how you stack up with your competition, because those decisions are made locally, and companies like that, because you know they know that they set up shop, something happens in the middle of the night, they can pick up the phone and somebody's going to be there. Somebody's actually going to answer the phone. They're not going to be in Ohio. They're going to be actually here in Kerrville. School district, Schreiner University, Dr. Faust, and I've known him now for some time since I've been here. But his passion really came out once he was there and really making a case for KISD. In addition to the community, spoke very well about the teachers and the students. So that came across very nicely, and the fact that they're already working on a aviation-related project dovetails nicely into this project that we're working right now. Workforce Solutions, the local folks, as well as some of the ones from San Antonio drove in for this particular meeting. Again, the importance of the project. Alamo Colleges, in addition to everybody that I've mentioned, another huge asset for the area. The fact that not only do we have a community college, but one that's tied into the San Antonio workforce grid. So they came in, they've done this many times. And as a result of that, we'll be meeting with them in San Antonio next week, specifically for this project. We had a lunch meeting with our city manager, city council, a couple members of our city council. You were there for that one, and that's when the company really opened up. Okay, here's what we're looking at. Here's, you know, they really started presenting the 3 factories that they have and how one of those would actually fit into the area. So that was very well received. Next morning, we had a debrief in our office, and that's where the rubber meets the pavement. I mean, city manager, assistant city manager, they were there in addition to Walt and myself. And okay, so the company now said, okay, here's what we have going on, and now starting to kind of figure out a plan of action and a checklist that we can start working from. So in the whole prospecting, in my experience in working with prospects, once you get to that point, especially in your first visit, that's a very good indicator. Next day, the company drove out to San Antonio and met with one of their clients. and mention, we're looking at Kerrville, so on and so forth. And apparently they did a very good job in San Antonio of selling Kerrville, because that company said the closer you all are to us, in addition to being a very nice place, the better as far as what they're trying to do for their overall product, considering that this is an OEM. And again, this was a result of, I don't like to use the word aggressive, but just being assertive as it pertains to economic development. Once we started figuring out, okay, what kind of projects are out there, the ones that make sense for our area, and again, going after that sweet spot, which is that 30 to 70 job operation, this one made perfect sense. And when they gave us a green light as far as like, well, go ahead and come up and visit our headquarters, we jumped on it. The next day we're on the plane, met with their executives and started pitching Kerrville to them. So as a result of that, that's how we ended up having a site visit. And that's huge. I mean, that's key in the game of economic development and prospecting, getting them to come and visit the area. So now we're engaged. We're having high-level discussions, not just with a prospect, but also at the local level as well as the state level. A little bit more on that here in a bit. We've got in the internal team hosting a tag-up bi-weekly calls to make sure that we're all working off of the same checklist. We actually met this morning and went over some of those items. Friday, I got a call from the second in command from the Texas Workforce Commission. And what they do at the state level, it's the governor, chiefs of staff of the lieutenant governor, speaker of the house, Texas Ag, Texas Workforce Commission, and the Economic Development Division. They all get together on a monthly basis, and they share all the projects that they have. It's called their matrix meeting. And the Workforce Commission called and said, okay, I mean, I've been asked to call Kerrville because you all have a project that we need to be looking at. And that to me is like, all right, we're doing something right. We're being loud enough to where we're making sure that we get that attention now. So we're on the list, which means outside of incentives and what have you, now they're designating staff to support this particular project. I would like to emphasize a project of this size and of this magnitude for a community this size. Even when I was, down south, a much larger region, this is going to be taking up easily 80% of our time working this particular project. When I had a larger staff, we were able to afford to pull one, even two people and say 100% of your time is dedicated to this particular project. We don't have that luxury right now or yet, but I like to say that that's the difference between working a deal and actually closing a deal, that you have somebody designated and working around the clock for this particular project. Now switching gears here, about 2-3 weeks ago, we hosted a workforce roundtable discussion. That was our friends, our local friends with Workforce Solutions, Alamo Colleges, and then we had some of the folks with Workforce Solutions out of San Antonio that came in. And we had about 20 plus people in attendance. It was basically our top and private employers, which are the ones that really drive the local economy. And so Workforce and Alamo Colleges has just kind of presented the gamut of programs that they have available. And actually last week I got a call from, again, it was from the state saying like, hey, just so you know, we're now working with the state hospital. They were in attendance. We're working with the state hospital to make sure that we address their needs as far as workforce, because we understand that they're looking for a lot of people. So they're looking both at developing some local programs and not too thrilled about this, but also importing people from San Antonio for these particular jobs, because we do have a company that has a huge need. And again, that's the value add of having an economic development organization. You're able to mine, these different companies, see what kind of needs that they have, and then bridge that gap. We also just came back from the IADC conference. That's the International Economic Development Council. That's the trade association for economic developers. Thousands of economic developers are there. I had been asked to be a facilitator for one of the panel discussions. And that one was actually address needs and solutions. So we had to break up into groups and what have you. And there was, I had the rural and the suburban groups. Open discussion. It's like a 2-hour discussion until we finally started getting to some solutions. And it was pretty interesting because for me, it was okay, so we're not alone. So a lot of these communities said, we are now as economic developers, when before, we wouldn't get involved with housing or working with trying to, work with subdivisions and developers and what have you. And everybody said, now we're doing that because there is a huge gap between middle class or the working class families and the price of homes and the available or non-availability of homes. So now that has become part of our job, trying to figure out a way to bridge that gap, because without that workforce, we don't have the tools to work with not just the local companies, but on the recruitment side. So that was very interesting. I thought it was very just particular to this area, but no, I mean, everybody said the same thing. Okay, so in closing, at the last meeting, we had presented some of our performance metrics as it pertains to business retention, expansion, marketing, recruitment, so on and so forth. Next month is the start of our new fiscal years, and next month we'll be providing an end-of-year summary as far as where we stand with those performance metrics, and now moving forward, how we're going to start filling those, each of those categories, and then start that quarterly reporting thereafter for fiscal year 2020, in addition to the EIC, to our other stakeholders as well. Just on a final note, I know EA had mentioned something about one of his projects, and this particular company that came in to visit us the next morning when we did a debrief, he mentioned something about like, hey, so fill me in on your river trail. It's not my project, right? So I did the best that I could, so on and so forth. And he's like, yeah, I wrote the whole thing this morning before we came into work or to meet with you all. I'm like, oh, that's fantastic. Well, let me take credit for that, right? Which I didn't. And he said, this is because from where they're coming from, they're also very outdoor, family-oriented, and said, I could definitely see how this will contribute to our culture with our company. I could definitely see how people would probably use this to get from point A to point B, maybe even for their job. He said, absolutely loved it, enjoyed it. And I'm like, well, hey, that's how we roll around here. That concludes my report for this month.
Very good.
Questions?
When do you think you'll know something more on Skyworks?
The way I look at it right now, if you would have asked me, and I know we had this conversation about 2-3 months ago, and I couldn't put my arms around it. 2-3 months ago, I was like, this could be 1 to 2 years out. Now that it's really progressed, I think 6 to 8 months, which on economic development terms, that's fast track. Mm-hmm. So you'll be hearing more about this particular project, and I would be happy to do one-on-ones down the road to fill you in some more in that regard.
Other questions?
You said you had the roundtable with some of the big employers here in the area. Kind of, what's the general consensus on the availability of workforce for these smaller businesses that are operating day to day here now?
Okay, so we primarily heard the larger businesses, and they all said the same thing. We're at a point where we're struggling to find people, which we're now getting to the point where that means that for the smaller businesses, and that's what we're trying to avoid, right? Is they start cannibalizing, from each other, and that was pretty much the consensus. Asking the state and the local workforce, what can you do to help us? Because we just need more people.
All right.
I'd just like to add one thing. Gil was kind enough to invite me to one of the meetings with the company that was in, and I was so impressed because not only of the quality of their work and the accolades from their current people that they service and the scope of it, the technology of it, but also because it was right-sized for us and their value systems. I mean, it was just like they had read 2050 and were kind of going right down the line. It was such a comfortable fit, and I felt real good about that. I hope that came across to them.
It did.
Good.
And
Good.
whether it's by accident, coincidence, or not, I mean, not just for this project, But for other ones down the road, everything's lining up nicely. We just now need to really take advantage of that.
Good. All right. Thank you very much, Gil.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to item 4, which is a public hearing. Seems like I miss a step or two every time I do one of these public hearings, but I've got it in writing now, and so I can't promise you, even with it in writing, I won't do it wrong. So, Mr. Hoppy,
You want to note the time on the public?
I certainly will. I go ahead and open the public hearing. It is 4:36.
I'm just going to start with a brief presentation, and certainly you've got the opportunity to open it up for any public comment within the public hearing. Again, remember this is an item that we briefed you on at your last EIC meeting in the September timeframe. I've just very quickly condensed the presentation that was provided by Ms. Mary Rohr and her board to really highlight the specific, less about the strategic plan and more about just the specific key development areas and the items that were pertinent to the EIC request. As you recall from the September briefing, this really deals with key development area 4 and 5 located at the jointly owned Kerrville, Kerr County Airport. Area 4 is related to box hangar work, and Area 5 related to what we colloquially call the horseshoe building. Again, Area 4 is related to site infrastructure work related to what is proposed to be 3 box hangars, not to be confused with the proposed T-hangar project, which you may have heard within some of the community dialogue. There is no EIC funding request that is for the proposed T-hangar work. That is a project that is being jointly funded by the city, county, and TxDOT. And so those are related, that's 10 T-hangars there. However, the EIC funding request portion is for a total well, that project is for a total of $200,000, $100,000 from EIC with a $100,000 county component. That is, again, economies of scale. While that T-hangar project is going on, we're going to have folks mobilized. We think we can get good bids on the site infrastructure work related to the box hangars. Again, typically the entities that are going into those box hangars are, there's a business component to that, right? So they're not only bringing tax dollars for equipment and planes that they may be parking there, but also have a high probability of having a jobs component, which is why we felt like an EIC funding request was appropriate. Area 5 related to improvement of what we call the horseshoe building. This is located just north of the existing Mooney facility, really broken into 2 phases. Again, a county match component on both of those phases. Phase 1 is $150,000 from EIC and a match of $150,000 from the county. Essentially, it's quite a bit of demolition work. We're moving the exterior walls. You recall from the tour we took a few months back. It's in pretty rough shape. This will really help market that for an entity to then come in and have a lease type situation. Be looking at doing site work around there, really tearing down a significant portion of the wall structure, as well as where those 2 X's are. They're basically 3-walled sheds right now, and pretty bad shape, 50, 60-year-old sheds. So taking a lot of that work down. The second piece is really a phase 2. That's a contingent funding piece, again, matched by the county at $125,000 each, but it's contingent upon a business and jobs prospect that would be coming in. Then those funds could be released for finish out work, and the reason for that is depending on what kind of finish out they may need, so that they know that the funding is there, it's reserved, it's ready to go. It's much more, gives us a higher probability of being able to lease the facility when they know that those funds are there. However, it is, again, contingent upon that business and jobs producing prospect coming in. Be happy to answer any questions you may have. Of course, Ms. Mary Rohr is here as well if you have any questions of her.
Questions?
Again, this is public hearing. Should you decide to move forward, the earliest possible date that would come forward for the city council final approval would be the November 12th city council meeting.
All right. No questions let me read the title into the record. This is a project funding agreement between the City of Kerrville, Texas Economic Improvement Corporation and the City of Kerrville, Texas for the Kerrville-Kerr County Airport related to site building and infrastructure improvements for the business enterprise activity. At this time, I'll open it up to the public for your questions, and I ask, is anyone here from the public want to address EIC at this time with regard to this project, this funding agreement? I don't see anyone here. So any other comments from presenters? Very good. So it is 4:41. We will close the public hearing. This item is also slated potentially for executive session, so we can move it there with your approval. If you so choose, we can go ahead and vote on the funding agreement.
I'm ready to vote. Come on.
I'm ready to vote.
No need to go to executive session? Okay. What that would require then would be, and you know what? I did this wrong. I've already closed the public hearing. Is that correct? Or it said I needed a vote first? Okay, we'll vote now then. Yay! See, these notes didn't work at all. All right, so I need a motion.
I move that we go ahead with the funding agreement for the airport project.
Very good. We have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor indicate by raising your right hand. And that motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, moving on to, looks like item 5 and 5A is, let me make sure I'm right. This executive session, we do have another item on executive session for discussion, and I do believe we probably want to talk about that one in executive session further. So if I could have someone make the motion under 5A, you can see the section associated with that particular item.
I'll move.
Move to go into executive session under section 551087.
That's what he meant.
Yep.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, raise your right hand, and we are adjourned to executive session. Okay, we're reopening the regular session. It's 5:17. No action will come from the discussions in executive session. Any items for future agendas from anyone? All right, I hear none. Any announcements? Hear none as well. All right, I can't ever remember. I don't have to have a vote on adjournment, right?
Adjourned.
We are adjourned. It's 5:18.